What's going on, everyone? Welcome to The Proverbial Life. This is a podcast where we encourage Christians to look to Christ, live wisely, and leave a legacy behind for generations to follow. Hope everyone's doing well. Happy Friday. And tonight we have a different kind of episode going on, something new, something different, but something that I want to continue to do. So with no further ado, tonight we're going to be doing a book review. But this is going to be unique because tonight I have the author here with me. This is my wife's book that she just wrote, Sarah Ramirez, Framed for His Portrait. For those of you who are interested after listening to tonight's podcast in purchasing this book, the links will be below in the description. Anything that my wife has out, book, she has some merchandise out. You can follow her on Instagram. She also has a YouTube channel. Show some support, show some love. Again, thank you guys for your support. I appreciate you guys just being in my life and being involved in this ministry. It means the world. Below, if you so feel led to contribute financially to the ministry, you can support me on patreon.com/proverbial life. I also have some links below if you would like to contribute in any other way. But anything is great, but prayers are appreciated. So with no further ado, I'm going to bring my wife in. Now, just a heads up, our daughter is awake. She refused to go to bed. So she's here tonight. Let's go over a little bit. She's here tonight, and she may do a little cameo. We don't know yet. But nonetheless, we're encouraged. We're excited. What we're going to do is we're going to discuss this book. And we are going to, there's several poems in here that I would like to just kind of read a couple of sections from, and then maybe even have my wife just kind of give some more detail on the thought behind the poems and really the inspiration behind the book. And so again, as we prepare to get started, please like this, please share this. This will also be available on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed to the Proverbial Life on YouTube, what's wrong with you people? In the words of R.C. Sproul. But please do so. Go to the Proverbial Life on YouTube, trying to put up content weekly. We also have the Leaving a Legacy podcast with Michael and I, and that's available on there as well. And we have just a bunch of different kinds of things on there. So again, this is the Proverbial Life podcast where we encourage Christians to look to Christ, live wisely, and leave a legacy behind for generations to follow. So all that being said, how you doing, boo?
Good.
Nice. Yeah. All right. So I got my boy here. We're going to chop it up. We're going to talk about this book. As we get started, the first thing I want to give a shout out is to the graphic design on the front. This was done by Genesis, genesispro.com. Check him out. Good brother in the Lord. Really does a great job. If you are interested in anything graphic design, maybe a book, a t-shirt, he's the one who did my logo for the Proverbial Life. He's also the one who did the cover for this. He did the Proverbial Woman, which is a shirt that my wife had on for our interview a week ago. Was it 2 weeks ago now? Yeah, maybe 2-3 weeks ago. So if you're looking for anything graphic design, let me know. I know someone. All right. I know someone. So that being said, let me make sure, because I don't think I'm on. 1 second, y'all, because I want to make sure that my Facebook page, because I'm not seeing comments here. 1 second. Hold on. Okay. Let me just see something here. So this is what we'll do. But if you would just maybe briefly give us kind of your thoughts on the book. And while you're doing that, I'm going to make sure that we are receiving comments. So maybe just give maybe a brief overview, what inspired you to write this book. And we're going to pull out some of the emotions behind it and the sentiment behind the book. So please share that with us.
So why I wrote why I wrote Frame for His Portrait has really been about 3 years in the making. And the book is 21 poems, and I already had come into, the reason that I finished it when I did was really just I wanted to come out of this lockdown with a new skill set in some way that I could leave a legacy for the kids and, encourage others and hopefully just, use my gifts in a way that honored the Lord. And so that is how, half of it I had written, throughout the course of the last 3 years in different circumstances. And then through the lockdown was how I just made the final push to accomplish it. And so there's 21 poems that range from grief to motherhood to nature to also really wrestling with different things that we were going through with the lockdown and, a lot of tensions that I was having. And so, that I was really in a dark place also. And so remembering how much, Edwin just always encouraged me, well, you got to write your book. You got to write your book. You could do this, and I also, wasn't in a season. I am a mom of 3 kids and homeschooler. And so, I just didn't think that, that I could accomplish it, honestly. And one of his good friends, Elias, completed his biography that he'd been working on. And that also really encouraged me to see that, somebody that I knew had achieved, a massive goal, and it made it seem like it was actually within my reach. It gave me hope that I could, do what I wanted to do for so long. So, but I don't, I don't have a degree in English or anything. This was just really something that I had, picked up, just really as a tool that the Lord had helped me to cope and really think deeply about things that, had been happening in my life. And in the previous video that I did with Edwin, he, we talked a little bit about just our struggles when he resigned from ministry. And my first poem that I had really written was in that season. So that's really kind of how it came about in the longer course of things, and then intensified as we were, going through the lockdown. And I just really was committed to coming out of it better and having, accomplished, really I've been able to accomplish a lot of things that I always wanted to get into or try, like no excuses. And so that's how kind of a little background of how the frame for his portrait was birthed and finally realized.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's so true. She really worked hard at doing this. She really put a lot of effort in, spent a lot of time just prayerfully writing. And it was really, this book is really an overflow of not just this season, but really her life. And, it's really encouraging to see that what my wife did to write this book was she used the scrap times, right? The times maybe when the kids went to bed, my wife stayed up an extra hour later, and wrote, or maybe the kids are taking a nap and she wrote, or maybe they're outside, like you'll see in this book. There's one called The Stump, or In the Garden. These are poems where she was in the backyard with the kids and just kind of thinking and talking to them and musing from God's nature and creation. And so and that's one thing. So in reading this book, one thing that I appreciated, there's a lot of things I appreciated, but one of the things I appreciated was that when you read the poems, a couple of things. One, my wife is really good at, she's kind of like a wordsmithy, right? The ability to bring words together and kind of craft them so that you can visualize and have a picture of what is being said. So it's like you're in the location of where she's writing from, and I really appreciate that. The other thing that I really like is that it's holistic, right? So it's it's pain, there's suffering. She writes about the death of her uncle and her grandfather and her father. But there's also a poem in here about a chickadee, which is a bird, and she kind of describes um, the features of the bird and maybe what the bird was feeling or thinking and how that relates to her life. And so I love that. And then I also love, just with that, the pictures of nature and God's creation, right? And I think that's one thing that, as I read this, and just poetry in general, that I really appreciate about it is that you have to stop and you have to think and you have to reflect. And because as Christians, we know that everything points back to a creator, and that creator is God himself, seen most clearly in the person of Jesus Christ, and seen most clearly through the scriptures. That when we're reading poetry, especially from a perspective of someone who is new in Christ, that it all reflects him. It all points back to him. So chickadees point to him, a stump points to him, hardship points to him. There's a poem. There's even a poem of me in here. And in there, it's, my relationship to my wife and what I signify to her, and what I mean to her. And so even that is a reflection of God's grace and God's kindness and his love. So yeah, well done. So is there anything, I guess a couple questions that some people had, and maybe for someone, and we'll kind of peel into this a little more, but for someone who is maybe interested in writing a book and they don't think they can do it, you kind of touched on this, but what would be some advice you would give to someone who just has that book in them and maybe they don't feel like they can do it, but maybe you can give them some kind of encouragement or inspiration to just do it?
Something that really just helped me, and at first I had really just only written the poems on, literal pen and paper. And I know there are so many, great apps and things out there to, get your thoughts out. And I had tried to, whatever everyone told me to, like, throughout the years, like, yeah, download this app, download this one, and, that could help you or whatnot. It just wasn't my lane. And so I eventually just literally, use pen and paper and just always have my notebook with me. And I had actually sketched out really, there's a poem in there called The Haunted City. And I had actually designed the book 2 years ago to totally revolve around, the book was supposed to be The Haunted City. But I had already had a blog framed for his portrait. And I didn't want to do The Haunted City really anymore. And anyway, so instead of going with, how I had mapped out that the book would be 2 years ago, I, decided to just keep writing and write it under frame for his portrait, and literally using pen and paper. And like Edwin said, I just, when I was with the children and whatever was going on, I had my pen nearby, and I would just write if I had an idea, or if Edwin and I were having conversation, and I just, was recognizing tensions that I was having, or, anything that gave any kind of a spark of an idea, I just wrote it down literally. And there were definitely sacrifices, in the sense of, I think we ate for that last 2 weeks that I was really, finishing up the rest of the poems that I needed to meet my goal, and trying to work on, outsourcing things, and getting everything set up that I knew, I had never published before. So I didn't have any idea really what that was going to entail. And so, we ate like frozen meatballs and spaghetti for a lot of weeks, or, for a lot of consecutive meals. There were definitely sacrifices, but I knew and I understood that it was only going to be for a season. And I included the children in the sense of, the poem that he referenced, Chickadee. One of my daughters had helped me remember some facts about about them, and I tried to just, involve them how I could, but literally just a lot of the poems were birthed out of us just fleshing out life. And I would, stay up late and try to, use that time to think deeply. And also, if my daughter was napping, use that time. And otherwise, I just literally use a pen and paper and had
Yeah.
that with me. And, um, just was determined to use that time to accomplish my goal. And even in the midst of having to make sacrifices. So
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and again, so for those of you who are just tuning on, this is a book that my wife wrote. It's called Frame for His Portrait. It can be found on Amazon in the Kindle and also the book format, and any other links. My wife also has some T-shirts that go along with the book that you can purchase on the link in the links below. So, I mentioned this earlier, but one of the things that I think people, one of the things that I think it's difficult for Christians at times to convey to the unbelieving world is that if we experience hardship, or if we experience suffering, that's going to be something that maybe drives people away from Christ, because we're not living by faith, or we're not really trusting God. But really, when you read this book and some of the poems, you have one here, and it's actually one of my favorites. It's called Silver Bullet, and it's about your uncle, and I'll let you go in a little more detail about that, but it's about your uncle who committed suicide. And the suicide is real, right? We see the statistics, especially during times of the COVID-19 and the pandemic that we were facing, and still in many places are facing across the world. We see that the suicide rate has gone up. Well, this is a real life, tangible story, and real person who we know and love, right? Who killed himself, and there were no signs up until that point where he, took his life. And so, I particularly share that the suffering, the Christian walk, and then also kind of, your uncle and that suffering and pain, and how that kind of brought about maybe even some healing in writing this.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. The Silver Bullet has actually been one poem that I've gotten the most feedback on, that people really have resonated with it. And I think it would definitely, my hope, if I could sum it up in really, one sentence in writing this whole book, would be to give words to people that are struggling to find, the words to even, put in how they're thinking about, what they're thinking, and processing it. And so with the Silver Bullet, I never thought I was going to get that call, and, like I mentioned in the poem, I was over 1,000 miles away. And, it's interesting to me now, because now when I read it, I'm in a different place than I was when I wrote it. I was a lot more just mad at him.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, in what happened to my father also, I would have never thought that, anybody in my family, especially not his brother, would have taken their own life. And
Yeah.
I really struggled with that, because, it felt like, it felt like my dad, what I had left of my dad, was being taken also, because now I had nobody, not his perspective, his unique experiences with my dad were gone. And his memories with my dad were gone. And so I never thought that was going to happen. And so it's interesting to me, though, because now, having gone through all that we went through with the lockdown, and seeing all the different all the multifaceted ways that people were impacted financially, physically, socially. All these ways are ways that my uncle Mike was, struggling, and, just, as I lay out in the poem, all the things that he was going through, it's what everybody has, a lot of people have been up against now. So it really helped me to actually, stirred so much more compassion in me for him. And in seeing how dark I was feeling throughout, the most intense times of our lockdown, it really helped me to have more compassion for him, and how that level of despair that he was at. And I had always, just thought, how, I shuddered at the thought of how despairing he would have been. And then really throughout this lockdown, and seeing the tensions that I had, and the struggles that I had, and the darkness that I was going through. And it really helped me to actually, reframed kind of more compassion for him, and seeing, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to read a segment of this, because this is really powerful. Think about what my wife just said. This is the last kind of picture or person that is also, represented somewhat of her father, right? The memories, even the imagery, right, of seeing his face, and also being reminded of dad, and being able to pick his brain and things of that nature, right? And then I want you to hear this. It's called Silver Bullet. This is page 19 of the book, and this is how Sarah opens up this poem. She says, "It's not my fault, but it was our frailty, the day the silver bullet took you away." And that really struck me when I read that, because the temptation is for us to think that it's my fault. And she actually goes on to say that, could I have made some more calls? Could I have invited you over? Could I have done more to keep you alive? And, even though as Christians, we know really the kind of answers to those things, right? But in the emotion of the moment, and the pain and the loss and the hurt, these are real raw questions that rise in us. And I really appreciate it. Sarah goes on to say, "Where was I when the shot rang out 1,118 miles away, when the neighbors heard the sound of hope gone astray? What was it loaded with? Was it loaded with fear, with anxiety, with remorse, with condemnation, failure, regrets, despair, loneliness, dreams of better days?" What was that gun loaded with? Mama, come down. Girl, just trying to be on TV. What was that gun loaded with? And I love that picture. And then if in the end, you want to get her? Yeah. In the end, this is what Sarah says here in this segment. She says, "It's not my fault, but it was our frailty, the day the silver bullet took you away." This girl. "The day the silver bullet took you away. We could always call more. We could always write more. We could always visit more. Let us not take such things so lightly, lest the silver bullet take more away." And so I love that, right? Appreciating and not taking for granted the blessings that God gives us in people and the relationships that we have. And so this is just one example of the several poems in here that really highlight that fact, that really just draw that out. The scriptures tell us that our life is like a vapor, and we are awaiting the day for our King to return. And in the meantime, in this war, there are going to be people who don't survive, right? And we have stories and memories, and they're sent to remind us. And legacies like this, right? My children may not get to they'll never be able to speak to Uncle Mike, right? Or Uncle John or Grandpa again, but they have pictures in words that can remind them of a semblance of the kind of person they were. And so my wife really does a great job in showing those pictures. Do you have anything else you want to say? I do have a couple questions.
No.
Okay, so a couple questions here. Number one, I think you alluded to this, but what was your most painful poem, and then what was your most? Let's start there. What was your most painful poem to write, and why?
Probably. Well, when we first moved back here, one of the big factors in moving here was because of my grandfather, and he had really bridged the gap when I lost my dad, and he ended up passing away only within 7 months after, 7 months after we had moved here. And so it was really just a huge blow again to like, what are we doing here now then? And so then when he passed away, it was his poem. It's called I Thought I Could Write a Poem. And it was just
He's trying to get on TV, girl.
It was totally gut-wrenching, but it was also the catalyst of me seeing how much of a tool poetry was going to be for my healing. Mm-hmm. That, literally other funerals, that in other, instances of things that were so difficult, actually, the Lord brought about healing in just being able to write. It was just such a good tool, and still to this day, in getting through the darkest parts of our lockdown was attributed to me being able to think deeply and to put out how. Do you want to just show them what is happening on the other side?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me I gotta see this. Yes. Okay, you're baby famous now. Okay. All 6 people in here saw you. You good? You got it out of you, girl? Okay. Let's keep going.
So yeah, the hardest poem that I wrote was definitely I Thought I Could Write a Poem, which is ironic, the title, but that was kind of the point. Was this was so gut-wrenching, I don't even know what to say. And in not knowing what to say, I actually found my voice to say what the tribute that I wanted to give him. And the same kind of, thing went with the poem that I did for my Uncle John, that I lost to cancer after very, very short battle. And in the same way, it was, I don't even know how to put this into words, And so that was definitely the hardest poem to write, though, was for my grandpa. The poem that's in there titled I Thought I Could Write a Poem.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah. So again, guys, this book is available right over here on Amazon. The links are below. This is Framed for His Portrait. Beautiful book. This is something that you can just read outside as you just kind of reflect on God's creation and just think about the Lord's goodness and just the ability to, to see God in His creation, and then to think about the ups and the downs and how God and His providence is over all things, and He's leading us and guiding us and instructing us in everything, right? In all things, right? We think that only when good things happen to us that God is on our side, right? And when bad things happen to us, or what we would say is bad things happen to us, that God is far from us, that He doesn't love us, that He's not near to us. But quite the opposite is true, right? That God is with us, and the scriptures promise that He'll never leave us or forsake us, that when we're going through our valleys, He's with us. When we are on the mountaintops, He's with us. He's always with us. He's always guiding us. And that's something that I really appreciate about many of these poems. What was the most, rejoiceful, exciting, fun poem? I think of one about our son.
Yeah, I think one of the funnest poems to write was the poem called The Lost Things, because literally, and again, this, I hope this could help people understand, I really did do it while I was doing life with the kids. And my son, he had lost his, it was kind of like a pocket knife. And it was like so precious to him because Poppy gave it to him. And yeah, so now that poem was birthed out of having to figure out, where is this thing? And that, I'm pretty sure I was actually in the middle of writing a different poem and I had the kids outside. And now this interruption, happens. And it was great to just put that. I mean, any wife, any mom is going to be able to relate to that poem. And maybe your husband doesn't cry like the lost things cry in that poem when he loses many things. But, it was just, I had the most fun just kind of giggling to myself as I'm writing that poem, but also, fleshing out, helping him and showing grace and mercy to him and not condemnation.
Yeah.
Even though, that's the tension. If it was so precious, why is it not being taken care of and cherished? And so, yeah. So I think that was probably one of my most fun poems. But I definitely enjoyed it. I love just the way chickadees like just really minister to me because they're so hardy as far as, just the harshest, we live in a harsh climate and they're there. They just ride it all out. And so it was fun to put myself in the position of the chickadee also when I wrote that one. So I would say Lost Things, and then, Chickadee was also really, really fun. I had to pepper some light-hearted things in there because it's very raw and, it can be maybe dark. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's good. I wish I could turn my camera around so you can see what my daughter's doing. She is flinging sand. She's taking advantage of the fact that we are live right now recording this because she's flinging sand down the stairs, like straight up volleying. There's a poem right there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so thank you. This is great, Boo. I really am proud of you. I really am. The amount of effort, come down, Mama. The amount of effort and toil and sweat and blood and tears you put into this.
Frozen meatballs.
Frozen meatballs. And then, and again, I also recognized that my wife, that God was, leading my wife to write these things, these poems. And so I wanted to honor that and respect that. And so I wasn't complaining about frozen meatballs. I was like, Boo, go do your book, like write. You want to get her because she's, I was really encouraging her to write it. And even during the down times when she felt like she just had no more in her, just kind of walking through that process of encouraging her and saying, nah, Boo, you got this. Let's do it. So I'm going to let my wife get the last word. If there's anything else that she wants to say, again, please consider purchasing this book. It's on Amazon. The description is below, and you can just click one of those links. You can help support the ministry, again, down below at patreon.com/proverbial life. And yeah, appreciate you all. Boo, you got the last word.
Nope. Yeah, I just really wanted to encourage everybody. Really, I do thank you so much for your support. Those of you that have already bought the book and reached out to me about, what you enjoyed or what resonated with you. And, really, I just, like I said, and like I say in the preface, I really wanted it to just be a voice to those that are hurting and wrestling and thinking deeply about what's going on around them, whether it's mundane or monumental things. And so I just pray that it would really encourage you with whatever tools that you have, whether it be, maybe you paint or you just go for a walk or, whatever you might do, the tools that the Lord has given you to just, process, that you would use them for his glory and not just let them rust, and I know that there's, you could be in different seasons. Thankful, I was in a season where now I could execute more because I didn't have a newborn, but, continue to just, lay the groundwork for when you are in a season and you can really just, accomplish what you've wanted to. And so I just encourage you to, just keep pressing. And I know I had many moments where I just felt like, what's even the point? Why even bother, really? And I just, for that one person that reached out and resonated with the silver bullet, it was all worth it. And so I just, really thank you for your feedback and your support, and just want to encourage you to keep pressing in what the Lord has given you to do. Don't give up, no matter how many frozen meatballs you've had to eat and the ways that, you've had to take temporary hits in order to accomplish it. Just, don't give up. And, as Edwin says in his podcast, we're looking to leave a legacy for the next generation. And, my daughter and my son, they saw me, do this work that, was a part of my talents and my gifting and what I wanted to do. And that left a legacy for them. And not only the physical legacy of just leaving the book behind for them. And part of one of the reasons also why is because I just, I wish my dad would have wrote a book and I could have known what was going on in his head and, had something to, just like I said, to know, what made him tick, what was his thought life like, and so I just, would encourage you to continue to think about how you're leaving a legacy for the next generation, whether that be something in a physical form, or, whatever the Lord is have you to do in your talents. And I just want to encourage you to just keep pressing and keep doing, what you know to do, and give yourself the grace to grow in that and to, I made a lot of rookie mistakes, but, it enabled me to do something. And so just keep pressing, Pilgrim, keep pressing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, links in the description. If you do purchase the book, please do us a favor. You can take a picture of the book, either with your face in it or not. If you don't like taking pictures with your face, that's fine. Take a picture of the book, and it's also available on Kindle as well, so that's an option. If you buy a T-shirt, there's several links in the description below. If you want to buy a T-shirt, take a picture with the T-shirt, and if you would, please put hashtag frame for his portrait. Hashtag frame for his portrait. Want to say nane? Come say nane.
Want to say bye?
Okay. So please do that. We're trying to just spread the word, and I'm sure that there's many more books to come from my wife, and this re-inspired me to continue to do all the things that the Lord has really placed on my heart to do, that I have coming, Lord willing, in the near future. So in the meantime, I'll just keep providing podcasts for you guys. But thank you all. We love y'all. Appreciate you. You want to say goodbye? Okay. Say nane. Okay. Say bye.
Bye.
Okay. Okay. All right, y'all. We love y'all. Maybe one of these days we'll do a Ramirez family live, and you can have all of us on here and have like a little Q&A with my kids on there. That'll be fun. All right, y'all. Well, until next time, this is The Proverbial Life. This is a podcast where we encourage Christians to look to Christ, live wisely, and leave a legacy behind for generations to follow. Grace and peace, y'all.